All right, welcome everyone. Let's get it started.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome from my side. It's a pleasure to see so many of you joining today's live webinar we're doing on cybersecurity. SIT Academy is hosting this webinar, and it's our first webinar in 2021 as part of SIT, Schaffhausen Institute of Technology, which is a research university with a very strong focus on applied physics, advanced material, quantum technology, but also computer science and software engineering, and finally its application in business and business science. And not surprisingly, cybersecurity is a very interesting topic, not only for our master students, but also what we do as part of SIT Academy in executive education and training. It's a pleasure to have next to me Candid Wüst, which is Vice President Cyber Protection Research at Acronis, and also member of our SIT faculty, in particular SIT Academy, where we do several trainings for executives and middle management in regards to cyber protection. And the topic of today, as you have heard, is top cybersecurity insights for this particular year. Now, before we start, please let me quickly mention some housekeeping rules. First of all, we have 45 minutes, so we strictly keep the time to release you after the webinar to your all other duties you have. We're going to start with a few insights from Candid. I will follow up with a few slides on our offering from SIT Academy, in particular to all the Acronis partners who are joining today. And then we have abundant time for Q&As. And I would like to really ask you to bring forward your questions you have. Use the chat function in Zoom, or if you joining us via another platform, just please feel free to forward your questions to us so we can answer it, hopefully, in these 45 minutes. With this, I would like to hand over to Candid, who is going to share with you, as I said, the top cyber insights for 2021.
Thank you, Philip. And yes, it is a pleasure to talk about all the threats that we have seen in the past, in 2020, but of course also having a kind of a lookout, what will be the prediction for next year, as in the next 12 months, but also what we probably should address even in Q1 of this year. And I have been working in cybersecurity for more than 20 years, and there's always something new coming up, even if it's the same that we have already seen, but with a new twist. As of course, we see new developments on the horizon as well. There was the move to the cloud, there was a lot of 5G, IoT, but one constant is there. Every day in the news, you will read something about some attack, some cyber attack being successful, making millions, or maybe some downtime somewhere where people can no longer, log into their Alexa or their Google Home because some part of the internet is down. And I just picked a few random news items here just to highlight what we have seen in the past, right? There has been huge information or misinformation campaigns like on Twitter, where someone actually managed, with the help of some insider and some persuasion, so social engineering, of course, always helps, going to the human effect, enabling them to take over some very prominent Twitter accounts from previous presidents, from Elon Musk's, you name it, all the big accounts, and they suddenly started to actually send out advertisements for Bitcoin. Well, you might say probably not the worst thing, but unfortunately there it was a scam, because if you would send the money, it would have been gone. And we also see that a lot of the attackers, they might not even misuse some vulnerability in the software, right? Like here, it was just persuading some user to kind of let them log in, or in some other attacks, we see that, credentials like for Zoom, WebEx, or Microsoft Teams, they are happily shared on underground sites as well. So sometimes the attackers might just download those text files with hundreds or even 100,000s of different credentials, and then try to log on to those different webcasts. Hopefully, no one's going to hijack ours, but of course, our password randomly generated for every session, so not much that should happen here, but yeah, let's knock on wood. But we also see that vulnerabilities are, of course, misused as well. We've seen that Microsoft has patched about 100 vulnerabilities per month last year, and there seems to be no shortage of those. Not all of them are critical. Not all of them allow you, by merely visiting a website or reading some email, to take over the whole computer, but some of them do. And of course, the attackers are misusing them because we know not everyone can patch in time. We've seen it 3 years ago with WannaCry, where there was a patch available for the vulnerability misused by the WannaCry ransomware. It was available for 2 months, and still hundreds of thousands of machines were not patched because it was not high on the priority list. They didn't have the window yet because maybe not enough resources, and that makes it sometimes difficult. And yes, I probably should talk about SolarWinds, right? I mean, it is probably the one that everyone was talking about in December and still is, because it's a huge attack that happened, well, now nearly about a year ago, but it just started to unfold over Christmas season and is still kind of finding out new bits, where we see that Microsoft was probably attacked even more than we expected in the first time, and hundreds of US government agencies, but also Fortune 500 companies have been infiltrated through SolarWinds software, so through a supply chain attack, because the attacker managed to compromise this specific one software provider, and through that trusted link, they were able to get into a lot of those companies. And we'll talk about that further on. And lastly, yes, ransomware definitely is big on the topic here as well. And we've seen many, many attacks happening. Specifically now, it's not just about encrypting your data, it's also about stealing information. You might have heard that information and data is the new gold of the internet, right? Probably is true. I mean, be it gold, oil, bitcoins, whatever you want to call it, it's definitely of value. And the attackers, they want to make profit, so that's what they go after. So we see large companies, even software companies or consulting companies like Software AG, have been compromised, and data has been stolen and is now leaked on the internet. But let's dive into some numbers from last year, just to kind of see what actually happened. We see on the vulnerability side, about 3 out of 4 vulnerabilities that have been exploited were in Microsoft Office documents or Excel or PowerPoint, those things that we use every day. And it doesn't really mean that Microsoft Office is way worse than all the other software packages. It's just that for an avenue, for an attacker, it makes sense, right? We see that most of the attacks still happen through an email with an attachment, and then it might be an invoice, or now very common since we are working from home, right? You receive a parcel delivery note saying, hey, your FedEx, DHL, whatever delivery companies nearby has sent you a parcel, but we couldn't find you. Please click on the attachment to find where you can collect it. And I mean, it happened to me as well. I order so many things during the lockdown that you lose track of, did I really order something there? Do I expect the delivery? So you might be inclined to actually click on it, but as soon as at least the pop-up message comes and says, hey, you should enable the active content, also known as the macros, that's a clear indication that this is not the real deal, and you should not start clicking on it, because then the malware would start in the background. Also want to highlight that, of course, cybercrime is a global phenomenon. It's not just happening in the US, or not just happening in the UK, in Germany, or wherever you are located. I've seen Bhutan here, I've seen Greece being mentioned. I mean, it is happening everywhere, because everyone is connected nowadays. We all use the internet in our daily lives. Well, maybe not everyone, but most of the people probably rely somewhere, somehow to it, even if it's just by communicating. And the attackers are misusing those. Of course, they usually, as I mentioned, try to make a profit. So we see that they, of course, want to make, well, an impact where it actually matters. So they will go wherever it actually generates the most impact for them. So if there is credit cards that they can steal, or online banking that they can attack, then that's definitely something that they want to go after. At the moment, very popular, of course, relief money. So for all those who are struggling with COVID-19, maybe they have to shut down the company or their shops. Well, some of the countries, they provide some substitute money to help them. But do you really know kind of which email address your government will be using to contact you? Probably not, right? So if it's very well made, they might be successful in stealing your private information. And we have seen some attacks where, for example, in Germany, they were not just stealing your information, they were then replaying the same information on the official website, but with the attacker's bank account number. So they actually claim the money for you, which means that even if you try later on the real website, you probably get denied and declined because you already kind of got the money. Unfortunately, it's not your bank account, it's the attackers. And as I mentioned, ransomware, and you see it here in the lower graph on the daily attack pattern, has definitely spiked during the lockdown as well. Specifically, now we've seen in September, October, another spike because everyone's still kind of itching to kind of be up and running. And we've seen that it's through the whole spectrum. Attacks happen through engineering and manufacturing companies, right? If they cannot produce, that's definitely a loss for the whole company. We've seen attacks against Garmin, where allegedly they paid 10 million to get some of their systems back and some of their data back. And well, they hope that the data was not published afterwards. We've seen attacks against pharmaceutical companies, even hospitals, because they have to be up and running now. So they might not have the time to negotiate for 3 or 4 days, and they might be willing to pay a little bit just to not have any downside if they not are prepared for it. And even, of course, cruise ships, entertainment systems, I mean, you name it, everyone could be a target. And I'm naming companies here, but of course, we also see the attacks happening against individuals. They rarely make it to the news because, well, they're probably not going to pay 10 million, but for them, $1,000 might still be a lot of money just to get your pictures back, get your diploma thesis back that you have been writing on. So you have to be prepared against those attacks. But enough of the past of what happened, right? We want to see what's happening in the future. So, of course, yeah, our crystal ball is a bit foggy at the moment. It's snowing in Switzerland, but I tried my best to come up with 9, let's call it predictions or trends that we see happening. And I'm happy to get back in 12 months and discuss how accurately we predicted those. The first one, well, it's not really a difficult one to say. We will see the same that we have been seeing, just a lot more out of it. And the reason why I see this is because it's working, right? Why should they change too much if people still click on phishing emails and put in their passwords online? They're still not using multi-factor authentication. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is still a very common password. So as long as we haven't solved those, the past attacks still work. But the attackers, they learn as well. So they are using machine learning, artificial intelligence to automate their attacks. So they try to do faster and more personalized ones. So whenever there is an attack happening where maybe someone is stealing some information from a database because a forum got hacked, they will use this information and say, hey, we've seen you have had a hotel booking canceled, but don't worry, candidate, here we send you a voucher, just click on this link, right? They use the information to make it kind of more personalized and also context-wise related to your daily business. So we definitely see more of this happening. In December, the AV Test Institute in Germany, which looks after antivirus and anti-malware testing for all those different softwares, they have seen 500,000 new malware samples every day. 500,000 new viruses, Trojan horses, and worms every day in December 2020. So you can see there's a lot of things out there. Yes, we see more and more attackers, but a lot of it is automated. It's not all done by hand, which means, of course, you as a defender, you should automate as well. Otherwise, you're just going to be flooded with many, many new attacks, and you probably will drown, and nobody really wants to do that. The second one, yes, ransomware. ransomware will continue because it is very profitable. Some of those attacking groups like Ryuk, they made on average about 2 to 3 million US dollars in revenue per month. Well, if you can call it revenue, but a profit for sure. And one of the point is, as I mentioned, it's not longer just about encrypting your data, but also stealing the information. So even if you have a backup of all the data, and you hopefully have one, right? And you hopefully have tested that you can replay it in time to not lose any kind of data and kind of valuable working time. But even then, if your data has been stolen and is now shared with your competitors, or well, maybe even some upcoming prices, right? Financial related information, it's definitely not what you want to have in the internet. Definitely not for everyone else to see. So we can see that this is a pressing argument for the attackers to push you into actually paying the ransom, and that's what they're after. Then we also see more companies that have moved to the cloud. I mean, it happened for the last few years, but during the whole lockdown situation with a lot of shops physically closing down, many of those had to move to the cloud. They wanted to be quick in having an online shop, delivering new services, right? And the cloud is ideal to do this. You're flexible, you can dynamically grow up, you can use software as a service directly without needing to kind of order some laptops which might not arrive on time and you have to send someone to install it on site. You just get the service and it's running. So it's a very good thing, but unfortunately the attackers, they know this as well, so they are already in the cloud. And we see that they, of course, they check for misconfiguration. Very often we see that, for example, Amazon AWS S3 data buckets, they are misconfigured very often. And it's not so easy to do, actually. I run a honeypot with 100 of those buckets. And if you misconfigure them, Amazon, and it's the same for Microsoft Azure and Google, they will tell you, hey, you're actually making it readable and writable for everyone on the internet. Are you really sure you want to do it? But yeah, if you just click next, 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 well, you might end up with one of those data buckets which is readable by everyone, and then this means your data could be stolen by attackers. And we have seen this happening hundreds of times per month, even with large websites that have been taken over through those buckets. So this is something where we see more and more happening. Now, of course, also containers, Docker, Kubernetes, or even just APIs, so serverless computation is very popular among companies as well as among attackers. So make sure that if you move to the cloud, that you get some experts to help if you don't have the resources yourself. If you have them, even better, but make sure that you check those configurations. Then as a fourth thing to look at is, of course, supply chain attacks. And we have seen that, yes, I mean, a lot of those supply chain attacks happen. SolarWinds is not the first thing that happened, right? We've seen in the past CCleaner, Asus, Netzerang. There have been many, many of those attacks. MEDocs for the NotPetya attacks. So it's happening more and more. But of course, well, you need to check those trusted levels because we're now so dependent on other software. Even if it's a library from an open source software, you have to double check, has it been tampered with? And would you be able to actually detect it? So make sure that this is not happening. And supply chain can also mean through a service provider. We've seen attackers going through service providers, and then they attack through that account all the customers, kind of multiplying it from there. Exposed services, again, not something really surprising, but it's growing fast because now everyone's working from home or from anywhere, but they have to access the servers, right? So it's usually remote desktop protocol, RDP, in the machine on the office, and probably it's open to the internet. So all you need to have is a password if two-factor authentication is not enabled, and then you're in as an attacker. So we've seen daily scans for hundreds of thousands of machines, and then the password is brute forced, and they might be lucky to get actually in. So make sure that every service which is exposed to the internet is also hardened and monitored so that you wouldn't know if something happens to them. And make no mistake about it, the attackers, they know their targets. Yes, there are some which just kind of spray can attack and see who has one of those services out there, scan the internet, maybe they're lucky. But a lot of them, once they are targeted or locked onto a company, they will do some research. They will do research through the malware, which can get some information back. Which antivirus solution are they using? Which backup solutions are they using? And then they will try and find some vulnerabilities like, hey, maybe I can delete the backup files because the antivirus does not protect the backup files. And they will misuse this. So they know probably your local environment better than you, and they will use all the tools available against you. We have seen attackers misusing backup software to steal the information. So they create a backup, but they will put the backup on their own server. So now they have all the information stolen, and you might not even notice because it's the normal traffic flow if you don't monitor for it. And this is also something, kind of those business process attacks will be happening more and more, where they might not misuse a vulnerability, they might just misuse the logic or the services which are already available. This could start from enabling someone to create some valuable tokens by just kind of flipping a few bits, resetting passwords without knowing the email address itself. Happens every time, more often than we think. But all those might not be a vulnerability in the software. It's just about how the systems interact with each other, because IT systems tend to get and grow more complex over time. And as a seventh one, of course, yes, IoT and OT. So all those Internet of Things, but also machines in manufacturing lines, they get more and more connected. We will see it with 5G even more. So maybe it's not just your camera at home, which is now connected, or your self-driving car, but of course it could be the whole office, right? From lighting to heating and so on. And we have seen some attackers where they came in through those OT IT and then jumped to the normal IT infrastructure. And of course, if they manage to kind of shut down the whole production line, as I mentioned, that's a very strong argument for a ransomware attack right there. So we probably will see more of those happening. And even if it's not for shutting it down, just imagine the denial of service attacks that can happen with 5G being connected through a botnet attacking some websites. This is a real bandwidth issue there, which can bring down even big ones, cloud provider, which can have some repercussions for all the other businesses. And last but not least, well, yeah, the advanced persistent threats, APTs, so the nation state actors, the most sophisticated ones, they're of course still happening as well. We see those political motivated ones to get information, espionage, but we see that the lines are blurring. It's not that they have the tools that nobody else has. We see cyber criminals using the same tools for profit as well. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, kind of 9 points of what we think will definitely keep us busy for 2021. And you probably should get started now and not wait till next December, because it's not going to get better, unfortunately.
Okay, Candid, thanks a lot for sharing. I think this is very helpful and insightful for all of us. Now, you have shown us 9 threats which you see as the most important ones for this year. Now, if you imagine yourself being responsible for a mid-sized company, how would you actually make sure that these attacks cannot happen, and what kind of measures would you take actually to prevent attacks like the ones you have mentioned?
I think the main point is to see that you can prevent them. There are tools available, things that you can do to not fall victim for them. And of course, as always, it's a combination. But if I would have to pick 1 or 2, I probably would say do the best practice. Start with strong passwords, right? Authentication. Make sure that wherever possible, you can use multi-factor authentication, those secondary tokens, being it a smartphone application where you have a second password being popped up for your VPN connection, for example. So making sure that if someone can steal your password, they don't get the golden key to the kingdom. And the second one, of course, is, yes, be prepared for attacks like ransomware. So making sure that you have a backup, you can restore it. And the best thing is play the exercise. I mean, if you are a company, I know everyone has too much on their plate anyway, they might not have time for it, but it's really valuable if you can play the scenario and say, okay, what happens if we are attacked on this machine. How would we see it? Do we have monitoring in place? How can we get the data back? Do we have the data? And once you have that, and please document it as well, whenever something actually happens, and of course, I hope it never happens to you, but it could happen, right? Then you can take this and just follow step by step, which makes you a lot calmer in those situations. So those 2 tips, I'd say, for a start.
Great. And I think as a representative of Acronis, you would also agree that technical measures are super important here when it comes to this topic. But is there also an area in regards to administration or human resources which you would consider as important when it comes to cybersecurity?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, of course, I should put in the shameless self-plug there and say, Acronis has, of course, a very unique opportunity here because we have a cyber protection solution which integrates the backup part with the anti-malware part and management, combining everything in one console, making it less complex. And of course, less complex means you make less mistakes, you have everything visible for you, and therefore also more secure. But yes, you have a good point. Technical solutions are just one part. Overall, of course, the strategy of a company needs to have administrative measurements as well. This can start from awareness training. So making sure that all your users are actually aware of phishing emails. You can do some phishing tests. You can do some demo videos. We all know there will always be 1 or 2 who always click on those parcel deliveries, or they think they have won the Spanish lottery. So yes, I'll click and want to have those 400 millions. They will fall for it. But you can still reduce your surface risk. You can reduce your kind of exposure and increase the resilience against those attacks. And also, of course, the whole, let's say, organigram. So how do you set up the whole infrastructure and teams inside your company, right? Does the CISO actually have the power to say, I'm pulling the plug, I'm putting the whole company offline? Do they have to call the CEO and the CTO at 2 o'clock in the morning? And would they or not? So having all the structure in place definitely helps. And maybe as a third example, as it's always coming up, communication, right? Do you have your PR and marketing team involved? Because very often, unfortunately, we've seen those cases, right? Attacks happen and the first reaction is, oh, no, nothing happened, we didn't get hacked. And then a day later you say, well, we have been hacked, but no data has been stolen. And in the end, it turns out actually data has been stolen and it's a bit worse than expected. So make sure you have a good and proper communication plan in place and inform the right people at the right time. So those are all non-technical measures, but they're still super important because in the end, that can bring down your company as well. If your shares drop 20% because you have bad press, no one's going to be happy in your company, believe me.
I fully agree. And that's why also from SIT Academy's point of view, actually, we see an additional important measure here to be taken, which is training, and training in regards to awareness. Because we believe the top management needs to have a rough understanding on this threat landscape and measures which are there to be taken from the technical side, but also from the managerial side. And that was our main motivation from SIT Academy to create this SIT Academy online course on cybersecurity, just to create awareness within a company, to have a good understanding that everybody talks about the same topic, has the same understanding of what's going on. And what we did, we created this online course with 2 main faculty. One of it, not surprisingly, is here next to me, Candid. You have heard from him, you have experienced his knowledge and his wisdom when it comes to cybersecurity and protection. And we had a second faculty joining us in this course, which was Rainer Kessler. He's a visiting faculty of SIT Academy and the former Cisco of UBS, one of the bigger banks in the world, and as well a person with a lot of experience in this topic. And now he's a partner at CyberHub, also doing a lot of consulting in this area. Together with these 2 people, we created a really fascinating online course with a very strong focus actually on 3 areas. First of all, it's the foundation, just to make sure that everybody has the same understanding of the cyber principles, but also the cyber threats, as we have heard. What's exactly the difference between a ransomware, an ATP, etc., so that there is very clear understanding on this side. And then the next level is actually the prevention. And when we talk about prevention, it basically comes back to the discussion we just had, the difference between the cybersecurity measures from a technical side, but also then from the managerial side. And last but not least, the whole recovery part with cyber audit and recovery, where the communication comes in, where the forensic comes in, etc. So you see here the rough structure of this course we created. And when we go down into the details, we have pre-recorded around 15 hours of content, everything divided in small chunks of 5-minute video input by our faculty, supported by additional visiting faculty who just came in for a quick information update or sharing their knowledge on particular areas, and animated with screens, bullet points, etc. You can go through this course completely in your own time pace, and you have also some interactive quizzes just to check your knowledge. And on top, we have also backup information there with a lot of analyses, reports, just to bring everybody up to speed when it comes to this topic. Why have we done it? Because we truly believe that nowadays the understanding and managing emerging information technology and cybersecurity is a critical skill for executives in all type of industries. And that was our main motivation to create this course. And it's not an expensive course for you to be taken. In particular, for all the Acronis partners who are joining us today, you even get a 20% discount to take this course. I only can ask you and suggest you to look into it and try it. Try it for yourself, recommend it to your friends and colleagues in your workplace. So actually the mission goes out and it can be accomplished, because again, we believe we can start everything in reducing the topic of cybersecurity threats by having an awareness landscape out there that people are knowing what's going on. And I think this is the critical point here. And this brings me now already to our Q&A session. And in the meantime, we have received at least one question I see already here. And Candid, the question is for the phishing emails. And the question is actually, if you look in your email box, you have a spam folder and you have your regular input folder. How good is the firewall and the spam folder in preventing that the phishing fake emails are actually coming as normal emails to your account?
I mean, it depends a little bit on what technology we talk about, right? There are some built-in ones in Office 365, in Gmail, and they already do quite a good job in your classical standard phishing. But as I said, we see that the attackers are increasing their kind of toolbox as well. So a classical phishing could be, yes, sending you an email saying, hey, as I said, a parcel delivery, please click on this link and then log in. And then, of course, they want your password. This probably should be filtered out in 80% of all the cases already, but we still see a few coming in. Where it's getting more critical is, for example, with business email compromise, where very often the attackers, they don't really want you to start a malicious application or click on a link. They actually want to get money from you directly. So those are the ones where they pretend to be the CFO or CEO of the company, sending an email, and sometimes it's from a typo squatted domain, meaning one letter has changed to the domain. So they registered a new domain, which looks exactly like the one from your company, but they flipped maybe a lowercase I to a lowercase L, which looks quite similar. And if you don't really pay attention, you think, oh, this is really my boss sending me an email asking me, can you please transfer $10,000 right away because we have forgotten to pay this partner and he's really angry now. So we need to get that sorted now. Stuff like this, unfortunately, does happen. We see billions with a B of dollars per year getting sent just by nicely asking, right? So you probably should double check where are you sending money to and so on. And of course, you can check those as well by simply adding a, let's say in the subject line, just add a bracket and say external. If an email comes not from your local people, from your internal people, but from an external site. So this could already give you an indication. The problem is, as we said, passwords are weak as well. So we see attackers logging into emails of real users and then sending them, sometimes answering an email thread that you had before. And this is very difficult. Most technical solutions will not pick it up unless you have some kind of trust graph or anything else which actually builds up over time, because signature-based, just relying on fingerprints, will not detect it, as it is the real email account. It's just someone else typing at the keyboard. And unfortunately, that's not there yet. I mean, artificial intelligence, we're trying to get it, and you can actually detect just by the typing patterns, but it's not kind of there where we want to be. So still room for improvements, but yes, always be skeptical, I'd say. So even if it's your boss, better ask twice and say, hey, do you really want me to send the money? And of course, not reply to the email, but maybe use the instant messaging that you use, or maybe even phone them, right? Video calls, still quite popular.
Great. And AI is a great buzzword, which brings me to the next question, which we have here. And you mentioned it already when you talked about the 9 threats, artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are going to be used by the attackers. And we have this topic also in the online course covered. And interesting enough, the question is actually, what's the opposite side? Is artificial intelligence and machine learning also used in the defensive part of it? And we have it mentioned in the online course as well, but maybe you can share a few words on this topic as well here.
Absolutely. We actually see artificial intelligence, AI, or machine learning even more used in the defensive part than the offensive part. So that's the good part, because it can help you to automate things, to be really quick, right? If you have 500,000 new malware samples every day that you need to sort through, that's something that a software can do quite quickly. And the second part is, of course, it can detect outliers. So if I'm, let's say, working 9 to 5, well, not really true, but whatever timing you have, and suddenly I send an email from, I don't know, maybe from Hawaii at 2 o'clock in the morning, that doesn't really fit in, right? It's the different IP location, it's different time. So that's an outlier. And then you can cross-reference it and see, hey, is candidate really enjoying some nice vacation, or maybe his account has been hijacked or someone else tries to mimic it. And these are things that artificial intelligence can be used to. For example, at Acronis, we use artificial intelligence for multiple things. One is, as I mentioned, we train a model with 10 millions and hundreds of millions of files so that we can say, oh, this new file we haven't seen before, but it looks very, very similar to all those ransomwares that we have seen before. So with 99.999%, it is probably ransomware. We can block it before it even starts. But we can also use artificial intelligence, and we do use it with Acronis, to predict hardware failures. So we can monitor your hard drive and say, hey, we see there are some some bad sectors on your disk, and we think it's going to fail in 2 days and really crash. So let's do a backup now so that you have all the data when you have to replace the disks. So it can help you for human errors or technical errors in that case, but also for attacks, defense on the various sides. And it's definitely an area which is growing and growing, because we believe that you need automation in the future. The attackers are definitely using it, so you should use it as well. And there are many vendors out there betting on that you can actually automate a lot of things. Not 100%. Don't worry, your job is still here. We still need human in the loop, the experts, to do some of the work. But we can get rid of all the background noise so that you can focus on the really important things and make the right decisions with the right information. Any other questions?
Yes, we have more questions coming in, and I think they are super interesting, and we try to answer all of that. And particular, if you don't send them anonymous, we make sure you're actually getting a reply even after the webinar. The next I see here, which I think is super interesting, is actually on the forensic audit. So how can IT forensic audit can be used and looked into to prevent these kind of attempts of attacks? How you do this?
So forensic very often comes in after an attack happened, meaning that you should hopefully have an image of your whole disk. If not, you can create one, and then you can analyze it forensically to see what's happened. For example, with the Acronis, with every backup, you can also create a forensic snapshot. So you get also the memory snapshot of all the running processes, all the active connectivities, and then you can later kind of go through it like a time machine, going back and say, what was actually the state of that machine? And the idea is you check for artifacts, right? You want to see which processes were running. Maybe there is a process which is not really supposed to be there, connecting to some IP address in a strange country, and you say, this is probably something that we need to investigate further. And with that, you can do a root cause analysis. So you'll connect all those informations together so that you can figure out, did they come in through email? Did they guess the password? Or did they misuse a vulnerability? And if so, can we patch it? So it is definitely very useful. I'd say I probably would combine it even with things like threat hunting, which is a proactive way where you say, okay, let's assume SolarWinds or Ryuk ransomware or some attack from the news. Let's assume this happened in our company. Would we be able to detect it? And then you go through a tabletop exercise and actually see, okay, or even more than a tabletop, you actually go through the log files and see, can we detect it, right? And you try to disprove your hypothesis by looking at the forensic evidence, saying, I don't see any connections in here. I don't see any new process being started. I don't see any new PowerShell script being started. So I assume I have not been breached. And very often, unfortunately, they find something and you have been breached. You just didn't know it yet. So absolutely, forensic is part and should be part of your tool chain.
Great. Given the time, I actually going to pick one last question. And this is about our company cell phones. If you have applications like Instagram or recently WhatsApp is also, I think, an issue here. What is your concern in regards to security when it comes to this type of applications on a company phone? The question is also about GDPR when it comes to privacy of the data. Maybe you can answer this as well in quick sentence.
I'll try to be brief. Yes, I mean, instant messaging tools from Slack, Mattermost, but of course, WhatsApp, Threema, Signal, and you talk it. There's a lot of concern with privacy per se. Do they really upload your whole phone book and so on? So that's one part. But from an organizational standpoint, GDPR definitely comes in, right? We've seen that people are sending screenshots or sending documents through those instant messenger, and this could be a data breach or a data leak. So you might need to look into data loss prevention, DLP, to see, would you actually detect if a disgruntled employee steals all your customer data and sends it to someone else through an instant messenger or through, let's say, WhatsApp at home, right? Would you be able to notice this? And also, well, do you block it if they install some application that you don't want to use, but maybe they just install it because they know, oh, my Slack is monitored, but this application is not, so I'm going to misuse those. So there are definitely privacy, GDPR as in kind of data leakage problems, but we also have seen attacks happening through it, as those applications might have vulnerabilities as well. So maybe they send you a link, and if you click on it, you will actually start some malicious script in the background. So you need to be able to patch those and watch for any takeover attempts. So yes, should be in your consideration for sure.
Okay, Candid, thanks a lot for being here with me today and sharing all this knowledge to all of us here joining this webinar. I will take the last minute actually to inform all of you which are out there about what we're going to do at SIT next. And one of the next events we actually have is the SIT Star Contest 2021. Similar like last year, we're going to run a contest. And if you feel bored and not challenged enough in your daily job, please feel free to join us. It's going to be a challenge. We have seen great results last year, and we're looking forward to many participants this year. So please come and join us. You have a chance to win some prizes. One of it is a full scholarship at SIT if you are interested in continue your studies. In general, if you like what you have seen today and you want to get more of that, go on our website, sit.org. There you find a lot of information about the SIT ecosystem with all the activities we are doing, with all the events we plan for this year. And you're more than welcome to join, dial in whenever you have time to our next events. With this, I would like again to thank all of you out there who took the time to be with us today for this 45 minutes. I hope you profited from what we have been able to deliver today, to share with you. And we're looking forward to see you soon again in one of our next webinars. Thanks and bye.
Thanks.